My name is Mark, and at 62, I've dedicated my life to being a firefighter in Chicago. The work shaped me, long shifts battling blazes, saving lives in the dead of night, and coming home to a quiet life that I built from the ground up. That evening, as the sun dipped low over the city skyline, Chloe arrived unannounced. My only daughter, now 35 and married into what she called a better life, walked into my modest living room with a determined look on her face. She sat across from me on the worn couch, the one I'd picked out years ago to replace the one lost in a flood, and got straight to the point. "Dad," she said, her voice steady but laced with that entitlement she'd picked up since her wedding, "Leo and I have some news. His parents are relocating from New York, and we've decided your house is the perfect spot for them to stay while they settle. It's got the space, the location by the lake, everything they need." I stared at her, the words sinking in slowly. This wasn't just any house. It was the one I'd scraped together to buy after years of hardship, the sanctuary I'd earned through sweat and sacrifice. And the reason for that sacrifice? Her. I remembered the day she'd come to me at 28, tears streaming down her face, clutching a doctor's note about a rare heart condition that required immediate, expensive treatment abroad. I'd believed her without question, sold everything, drained my savings, all over $450,000, to make it happen. Only later did I learn it was all a lie, a scheme to fund her dreams. But hearing her now, casually claiming my home for her in-laws, felt like the final twist of the knife. She continued, oblivious to my silence, explaining how the guest room downstairs would suit them fine, and that I could stay in the small upstairs space until they figured out something more permanent, like a spot in a nursing home nearby. My hands tightened on the arms of my chair, the calluses from decades of gripping hoses rough against the fabric. I'd raised her alone after her mother passed, poured my soul into giving her a future. And now this? "Chloe," I said finally, my voice calm despite the storm inside, "this is my home. The one I bought with what was left after helping you. Why would you even suggest this?" She waved it off, mentioning family obligations and how Leo's parents deserved the comfort after their long lives. As she left, promising to send over the details, I stood alone in the empty room, the weight of betrayal settling heavier than any smoke I'd ever inhaled. Little did she know, this was just the beginning of unraveling the truth. My name is Mark, and looking back, the sacrifices started long before Chloe's so-called diagnosis upended everything. At 62 now, I can still picture the day it all truly began, after the worst loss of my life. Emily, my wife of 25 years, passed away suddenly from a heart attack when Chloe was just 12. She was the heart of our family, warm, steady, the one who made our small apartment in Chicago feel like a home despite the tight budget for my firefighter salary. Emily worked as a nurse, and together we dreamed of something more stable. Her death left a void that no amount of time could fill. I buried myself in work, pulling extra shifts to keep us afloat, but Chloe needed more than just survival. She needed a future. That's when I decided to invest everything we had left into a small coffee shop on the south side. It wasn't much, a rundown spot I'd spotted while on a call to a nearby warehouse fire. The owner was retiring, and the price was right if I put down every penny from Emily's life insurance and our savings. I poured my off-duty hours into fixing it up, sanding counters, installing new espresso machines, even learning to roast beans from a local supplier. Chloe helped when she could, wiping tables after school and dreaming aloud about how we'd expand one day. The shop, which I named Emily's Brew, became our lifeline. It turned a modest profit within the first year, enough to move us into a better apartment and start saving for Chloe's college. Customers became regulars, firehouse buddies stopping by for their morning fix, neighbors sharing stories over lattes. For the first time since Emily's death, I felt like I was building something lasting, a legacy for my daughter. Years passed in that rhythm. Chloe grew into a young woman, sharp and ambitious, studying business at community college while working part-time at the shop. I was proud of her drive, seeing echoes of Emily in her determination. By the time she turned 28, the coffee shop had become a neighborhood staple, with 2 part-time baristas and plans for a second location. Life felt steady, purposeful. Then, one rainy afternoon in late spring, Chloe burst into the shop during the lunch rush, her face pale and eyes wide with fear. She pulled me into the back room, away from the clatter of cups and the hum of the grinder, and handed me a folder thick with medical papers. "Dad," she said, her voice breaking, "I've been diagnosed with a rare heart condition. It's serious, something called hypertrophic cardiomyopathy variant. The doctors say I need specialized treatment abroad, in a clinic in Switzerland. It's the only place with the right procedure." The words hit me like a truck. I scanned the documents, official-looking reports from a specialist, scans showing what they claimed was an enlarged heart chamber. Chloe explained she'd hidden symptoms for months: fatigue, shortness of breath, fainting spells during her runs. The cost was staggering, over $450,000 for the surgery, rehab, and follow-up care. Insurance wouldn't touch it, it was experimental, off the grid. I didn't hesitate. How could I? She was my daughter, the last piece of Emily I had left. That night, I lay awake calculating what it would take. The coffee shop was my biggest asset, valued at around $300,000 if I sold quickly. My savings account held another $100,000, built from years of scrimping. The family home, a modest 2-bedroom we'd owned outright since Emily's inheritance, could be mortgaged for the rest. By morning, I'd made calls to a real estate agent and a business broker. The shop sold within weeks to a young couple eager to expand it. I signed the mortgage papers at the bank, feeling the weight of the debt settle on my shoulders like turnout gear. Chloe flew to Switzerland a month later, and I wired the first installment, $200,000 upfront. While she was gone, my life shrank. I moved out of the house to rent a single room in a boarding house near the fire station, $600 a month for a bed, a hot plate, and shared baths. It was bare bones, but I told myself it was temporary. I'd visit Chloe when I could afford the flight, sending updates via letters since international calls ate into the budget. She wrote back with progress reports: the surgery went well, rehab was grueling but effective, doctors were optimistic. I worked double shifts, picking up overtime at the station to cover the mortgage payments and her ongoing bills. Friends noticed the change, my clothes hanging looser, dark circles under my eyes, but I brushed it off. Family first, I'd say, echoing Emily's mantra. Months turned into a year. Chloe returned transformed, healthier, glowing even, and full of gratitude. She hugged me tightly at the airport, whispering thanks that brought tears to my eyes. We celebrated with a simple dinner at a diner, nothing fancy, since my funds were depleted. She started dating soon after, meeting Leo at a networking event for young professionals. He was charming, from a well-off family, studying law at a top school. I was thrilled for her. After all the hardship, she deserved happiness. But as her life blossomed, wedding plans, a honeymoon in Europe, mine stayed small. The house payments drained what little I earned, and the rented room became my reality. Chloe visited less, caught up in her new world, but she always called on my birthday, reminding me how my sacrifice had saved her. Looking back from that betrayal in my living room years later, I realized the signs were there, the vague details about the clinic, the lack of follow-up visits to American doctors. But love blinds you. I'd given everything, the business Emily and I built from grief, the home we'd made our own, my peace of mind. Chloe's recovery was my badge of honor, proof I'd done right by her. Little did I know, as I sat there after her announcement about the in-laws, that the truth would soon force me to rebuild from ashes once more. The coffee shop sale had been the end of one chapter, but the real fire was just igniting. After Chloe's bombshell about her in-laws moving in, I tried to push down the rising unease and focus on getting my life in order. At 62, with the scars of old sacrifices still fresh, I'd finally clawed my way back to stability. It started small, right after Chloe's recovery. The mortgage on the old family home had been a noose, payments eating up my firefighter pension and overtime checks. But I refused to let it break me. I took on side work, fixing up neighbors' garages, consulting for the fire department on safety protocols, anything to build a buffer. One evening, while scanning real estate listings during a rare quiet shift, I spotted it, a small house on the outskirts of Chicago, right by Lake Michigan. It was modest, a 2-bedroom bungalow with creaky floors and a view of the water that stretched out like a promise of calm. The price was within reach if I sold the old place. I remembered standing on the porch of that first home, the one Emily and I had painted together, and making the call to the realtor. It fetched just enough to clear the debts and leave me with a down payment. Closing day on the new house felt like a fresh start, the key turned smoothly in the lock, and I spent the first night unpacking boxes alone, the sound of waves lapping the shore filtering through the open window. No more rented rooms with thin walls and shared sinks, this was mine, earned through grit. I hung Emily's old photo on the wall, her smile a quiet anchor, and started settling in. The neighborhood was quiet, full of retirees and young families, and I walked the beach daily, letting the rhythm of the lake steady my thoughts. That's when Sarah entered the picture. I'd met her at a community event, a fundraiser for the local firehouse, where volunteers grilled burgers and swapped stories. She was 58, a retired teacher with a laugh that cut through the crowd noise. Her husband had passed years earlier from cancer, and she spoke openly about rebuilding her life through gardening and volunteering at the animal shelter. We talked for hours that night, about loss and the small joys that followed. Our first date was simple, coffee at a lakeside cafe, watching sailboats dot the horizon. She didn't pry about Chloe or my past hardships. Instead, she shared her own tales of raising 2 sons who now lived across the country. There was an ease with Sarah, a shared understanding of starting over. Over the next few months, our dates became routine, picnics on the beach, drives along the coast, even a weekend trip to a nearby town where we hiked trails lined with autumn leaves. She met my firehouse crew at a barbecue I hosted in my backyard, the one with the grill I'd fixed myself. They liked her immediately, teasing me about finally smiling more. For the first time since Emily, I felt hope stirring. Sarah talked about future plans, traveling to the national parks, maybe adopting a dog together. I proposed we make it official one evening, as we sat on my porch watching the sunset paint the lake in oranges and pinks. She said yes with a kiss that sealed it, and we started blending our lives, her books on my shelves, my tools in her garage space when she visited. But Chloe's world was spinning in the opposite direction, faster and brighter with each passing year. At 35 now, married to Leo for 5 years, she embodied the success I'd sacrificed for. Leo came from old money, his family owned properties across the Midwest, and he'd parlayed his law degree into a thriving practice specializing in corporate deals. Their wedding had been lavish, held at a vineyard outside the city, with Chloe in a gown that must have cost a fortune. I remembered sitting at the reception, proud but a bit out of place among the suited guests, toasting to their future. Chloe had landed on her feet, or so it seemed, a sleek apartment in the Gold Coast, charity galas, and whispers of starting a family. Then came the call that shattered the peace I'd rebuilt. It was a Saturday morning, a few months after Chloe's visit about the in-laws. I was in the kitchen, brewing coffee, strong, black, like always, when my phone rang. Chloe's voice filled the line, efficient and unyielding. "Dad, we need to talk about the house. Leo and I have been thinking, your place by the lake is ideal for us. The space, the quiet, it's perfect for his parents. They're getting older, need stability after the move from the East Coast." I paused, mug halfway to my lips, the steam curling up like smoke signals. "What do you mean, for you?" I asked, though I sensed the direction. She explained it all in that polished tone, as if discussing a business merger. Leo's parents, Harold and Vivian, were downsizing from their New York brownstone. My bungalow had 3 bedrooms, a finished basement, and that unbeatable lake view, prime for their retirement. Chloe and Leo would oversee the transition, turning it into a family hub. And me? You can stay in the guest room downstairs, she said casually. It's cozy, has its own bath. We'll help you find something more suitable soon, a nice spot in a nursing home near the city. They have activities, medical care on site. It makes sense at your age. The words landed like a gut punch. At 62, I was healthier than most men my age, still pulling shifts at the station, running miles along the shore without breaking a sweat. Nursing home? The guest room was a converted storage space, barely big enough for a twin bed and a dresser. Sarah, who was listening nearby, raised an eyebrow in concern. I pressed Chloe for details, timelines, logistics. She rattled off plans, movers booked for next month, realtor contacts for my transition. Leo chimed in on the extension, his voice smooth as silk. Mark, it's family helping family. Your place is underutilized, this way, everyone benefits. I hung up after agreeing to think it over, but the damage was done. That afternoon, Sarah and I walked the beach, her hand in mine, as I vented the frustration boiling inside. After everything I gave up for her, the shop, the old house, years in that rented hole, she sees me as a burden to shuffle aside. Sarah squeezed my hand, reminding me of my strength, but doubt crept in. Chloe followed up with emails, floor plans marked for her in-laws' rooms, links to assisted living facilities with cheerful photos of group exercises. She even suggested I pack early, framing it as an adventure. The pressure mounted over weeks. Chloe called twice weekly, each time layering on guilt. Dad, Harold's health isn't great, they need the calm environment you have. Leo sent a formal letter outlining logistical benefits, complete with cost breakdowns showing how my pension would stretch further in a facility. I felt cornered, the walls of my hard-won home closing in. Friends at the station noticed my distraction during drills, asking if everything was all right. I confided in a few, their support bolstering me, but the isolation grew. Sarah stayed steady, helping me research options, but even she worried about the strain. One evening, as I stared at the lake from my porch, the same view that had healed me, suspicions I'd buried for years resurfaced. Chloe's diagnosis, the clinic abroad, the money vanishing without a trace of medical debt. Why no follow-ups? No shared records? The pieces didn't fit. That night, I pulled out old files from the attic, bank statements, wire transfers, the forged doctor's notes. With Sarah's encouragement, I decided to dig deeper. Little did I know, this family pressure was the spark that would ignite the truth, forcing me to confront the deceit head-on and reclaim what was mine. The pressure from Chloe and Leo lingered like a persistent fog over Lake Michigan, clouding my days and testing the fragile peace I'd built with Sarah. At 62, I wasn't one to back down from a fight. Decades as a firefighter had taught me to face flames head-on, but this was different. It was personal, a slow erosion of the life I'd rebuilt brick by brick. Nights grew restless, I'd lie awake in my bungalow, the waves crashing outside like accusations, replaying Chloe's words about the nursing home. Sarah noticed, of course. She'd brew tea in the evenings and sit with me on the porch, her presence a steady anchor. Mark, she'd say gently, you don't have to decide anything yet. But if something feels off, trust that instinct. Her words stirred the doubts I'd long suppressed, the nagging questions about Chloe's illness that I'd buried under layers of paternal love. It started with a simple decision one crisp morning. I was sorting through old boxes in the attic, preparing, against my better judgment, for the potential move Chloe kept pushing. Amid the dust-covered relics, I found the folder from 7 years ago, the medical reports she'd shown me, yellowed now but still crisp. I scanned them again, the jargon about hypertrophic cardiomyopathy staring back like a foreign language I couldn't quite read. Dates, doctor names, the Swiss clinic's letterhead, it all seemed legitimate at first glance, but something nagged. No copies of actual scans, no discharge summaries from the procedure. And why had Chloe never needed follow-up care here in the States? Successful as it supposedly was, no cardiologist locally had ever reviewed her case. I set the folder aside and called in sick to my shift at the station, a rarity for me. Instead, I drove into the city, the familiar streets of Chicago blurring past as resolve hardened. An old family friend came to mind, Dr. Robert Evans, a cardiologist I'd known since Chloe was a kid. He'd treated Emily during her final days, a kind man with a no-nonsense demeanor and access to international medical databases. We hadn't spoken in years, but I remembered his number from holiday cards. I pulled over at a coffee shop, ironic, given the business I'd lost, and dialed. "Mark?" "It's been too long," he answered warmly, though surprise edged his voice. I explained the situation haltingly, Chloe's announcement, the pressure on my home, and now these resurfacing doubts. "I need to know if this diagnosis was real," I said. "Can you check records?" Discreetly. Dr. Evans agreed without hesitation. "Give me the details, the clinic name, dates, everything. I'll see what I can access through professional networks." We met that afternoon at his office near Northwestern Hospital, a quiet space lined with textbooks and patient charts. I handed over the folder, watching as he pored over it with a practiced eye. He cross-referenced names against global registries, pulling up secure portals on his computer. Minutes stretched into an hour. Finally, he leaned back, removing his glasses, his expression grave. "Mark, there's no record of Chloe ever being treated at that clinic. No admission, no procedure, nothing. The doctor's name you mentioned? It's fabricated, doesn't exist in any Swiss medical directory." The room spun for a moment. I gripped the armrest, the weight of betrayal crashing down. Dr. Evans continued, piecing it together. He'd discreetly checked U.S. records too, no prior symptoms reported, no consultations leading up to the diagnosis. The papers I'd seen? Forged, likely by someone with basic access to templates online. "This isn't just a mistake," he said. "It's deliberate." "I'm sorry, Mark." We talked for another hour. He advised documenting everything but warned against confrontation without evidence. As I left, the Chicago wind whipping my coat, a cold clarity settled in. Chloe hadn't been sick. The $450,000 I'd poured into her treatment, the coffee shop sale, the mortgage, my savings, had vanished into thin air. Back home, I couldn't sit still. Sarah arrived that evening with takeout, sensing the storm in my eyes. I laid it all out, the call, Dr. Evans's findings, the forgery. She listened without interruption, her hand on mine. "What now?" she asked when I finished. I didn't have an answer yet, but the questions burned. Over the next few days, I dug deeper on my own. I contacted the bank for old statements, tracing the wire transfers to the Swiss account Chloe had provided. The money had flowed out quickly, first to the clinic, or so it seemed, then diverted. With Sarah's help, I hired a private investigator on a modest retainer, a retired cop from my firehouse circle named Tom. He was discreet, efficient. Tom's report arrived a week later, a slim folder that hit like a verdict. The funds hadn't gone to medical care. Chloe had funneled most of it into a lavish lifestyle, designer clothes, high-end vacations to places like Monaco and the Maldives, documented through social media posts I'd never seen, her accounts private, shielded from me. Photos showed her at yacht parties, Chloe beaming in outfits that screamed excess, Leo by her side. But it went further. A chunk, around $150,000, served as startup capital for Leo's law firm. He'd launched it right after their engagement, claiming family loans, but bank records tied it back to my wires. The rest? Luxury real estate. They'd bought a condo in Miami under a shell company, a beachfront property now valued at double what I'd given. Title searches confirmed it, deeded to Chloe and Leo, no mention of medical debts or repayments. I sat at my kitchen table that night, the investigator's photos spread out like evidence at a scene. Chloe, Tanned and carefree on a balcony overlooking the ocean, Leo shaking hands with investors at a gala. The life they'd built on my ruins. Rage simmered, but I channeled it into planning. No rash moves, this wasn't a fire to charge into blindly. I gathered it all: Dr. Evans's affidavit, bank trails, property deeds. Sarah supported every step, even accompanying me to a notary. "You've given enough," she said. "Time to take back control." Whispers of what came next formed: the family dinner Chloe kept inviting me to, a chance to lay it bare. But first, I needed one more piece: the sale of the house, quietly in motion with a realtor friend who specialized in charities. As the truth unfolded, so did my resolve. The deceit wasn't just financial, it was emotional, a theft of trust I'd nurtured since Chloe was born. Emily would have been heartbroken, but she'd also urged justice. With Sarah's unwavering backing, I prepared to end the charade, step by step, ensuring every fact stood firm. The bungalow by the lake, my sanctuary, would soon change hands, not to in-laws, but to those who'd earned a second chance, much like I was claiming mine. With the truth laid bare like a smoldering foundation after a fire, I knew confrontation was inevitable. At 62, I'd faced down infernos that tested every fiber of my being, but this personal blaze required precision, not brute force. The evidence piled up on my kitchen table: Dr. Evans's detailed affidavit confirming the forged diagnosis, bank statements tracing every dollar to Chloe's luxuries and Leo's ventures, property records linking my sacrifices to their Miami condo. Sarah helped organize it all into a binder, her steady hands contrasting my trembling ones. "This isn't revenge, Mark," she said one evening as we reviewed the pages by lamplight. "It's accountability. You've earned your peace." Her words grounded me, reminding me that justice didn't mean destruction, it meant clearing the path forward. The opportunity came with Chloe's persistent invitations to a family dinner. She'd been calling weekly, her tone shifting from demanding to coaxing, insisting on one big gathering to discuss the house transition. Leo's parents had arrived in Chicago, staying temporarily in a hotel, and she painted it as a celebration of their new chapter. I agreed, suggesting my bungalow as the venue. Neutral ground, I claimed, though my realtor friend had already quietly listed it for sale to a specific buyer. The charity angle was my safeguard, an organization supporting families of fallen firefighters, ones who'd lost homes to blazes or debts to medical crises. They'd jumped at the chance, offering a fair price that would fund scholarships in Emily's name. Closing was set for 2 days after the dinner, unbeknownst to Chloe. The night arrived crisp and clear, the lake breeze carrying a chill that mirrored the tension inside me. I set the table simply: roast chicken, potatoes, a salad Sarah insisted on contributing. Chloe and Leo arrived first, fashionably late, with Harold and Vivian in tow. Harold, a retired banker with a stern face, shook my hand firmly. Vivian offered a polite smile, clutching a bottle of wine. Chloe hugged me briefly, her perfume sharp, and launched into chatter about the house's potential. "Dad, you'll love the changes we have in mind, maybe update the kitchen for Harold's cooking." Leo nodded along, his lawyer's poise masking any unease. Sarah greeted them warmly, diffusing the awkwardness with small talk about the weather and her garden. We sat down to eat, the clink of silverware punctuating the forced pleasantries. Conversation flowed around neutral topics: Leo's latest case wins, Vivian's bridge club stories. I waited until dessert, apple pie, Emily's recipe, to steer it. "Before we go further," I said, pushing back my chair, "there's something I need to share about this house and our family history." Chloe paused mid-bite, her fork hovering. I retrieved the binder from the sideboard, placing it in the center of the table. "Chloe, 7 years ago, you told me about your heart condition. I believed you, sold everything to help. But it was a lie." The room fell silent, save for the distant waves. Chloe's face paled, but she recovered quickly. "Dad, what are you talking about?" "That was real, I was sick." Leo interjected smoothly, "Mark, this isn't the time. Family matters stay private. But I opened the binder, starting with Dr. Evans's letter. I read aloud the key parts: no records, fabricated documents, the clinic's non-existence. Harold leaned forward, brow furrowed. Vivian's hand went to her mouth. Chloe stammered denials, but I moved to the financials: wire transfers, diversions to vacations, the startup loan for Leo's firm. This money built your life, I said evenly. The coffee shop Emily and I started after her death. Our home, mortgaged to the hilt. Over $450,000, gone to yachts and condos while I lived in a rented room. Leo shifted uncomfortably, his eyes darting to the pages on real estate. I laid out the Miami property deeds, showing how my savings funded their beachfront escape. Chloe's eyes welled up, but anger flashed too. You don't understand, I needed it for us, for a future. Vivian spoke then, her voice soft but firm. Chloe, is this true? We raised you better. Harold demanded details, piecing it together with a businessman's eye. The dinner dissolved into questions, accusations flying softly at first, then sharper. Leo stood, phone in hand. This is slander. I'll handle it legally. But the evidence was ironclad, even he faltered when I mentioned the investigator's report. By evening's end, the guests left in stunned silence, Harold and Vivian booking a separate hotel, promising to talk to their son. Chloe begged me to reconsider, tears streaming, but I held firm. The house isn't yours to take. I've sold it, to a charity for firefighters' families. Closing is soon. She gasped, realizing the finality. That night, alone with Sarah, I felt a weight lift, though exhaustion followed. Word spread quickly in their circle. By morning, Leo filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences and financial discrepancies in court papers leaked to me through a mutual contact. He cut ties cleanly, protecting his practice from the fallout. Chloe faced the consequences head-on. Prosecutors got involved after I shared copies with authorities: fraud, forgery, elder financial abuse angles. But rather than prison, she took a plea: community service at a local shelter, 500 hours counseling families in crisis, and full restitution. It came in installments, starting with the Miami condo sale, which netted enough to repay me principal plus interest. She attended mandatory sessions with a therapist, writing letters of apology, one to me, raw and regretful, admitting the desperation that spiraled into deceit. I saw your sacrifices as weakness, Dad, and took advantage. I'm sorry. We met once, supervised, where she owned it without excuses. It wasn't forgiveness overnight, but a step toward healing, for her, and for the family she'd fractured. Free at last from the manipulation that had shadowed me for years, life bloomed anew. The house sale closed smoothly. I walked the empty rooms one last time, touching the walls Emily would have approved of, then handed the keys to the charity director. A check arrived weeks later, earmarked for aid programs, widows' funds, kids' educations. Sarah and I used part of my restitution to buy a cozy cottage further up the lake shore, smaller but ours, with a garden for her flowers and a dock for quiet evenings. One sunset, as fireflies danced over the water, I got down on one knee, again, properly this time, with a simple ring. Sarah, you've been my light through this. Marry me? She laughed through tears, saying yes, and we wed in a small ceremony at the station, surrounded by crew and friends. Our new life centered on giving back. I volunteered with the fire department's outreach, mentoring young recruits on resilience, while Sarah and I started a support group for parents navigating family betrayals. Chloe finished her service, moving to a modest apartment and taking a job in nonprofit work, ironic, but fitting. We spoke occasionally, rebuilding tentatively, boundaries firm. At 63 now, I look out at the lake and see not loss, but renewal. The sacrifices shaped me, the deceit tested me, but justice restored me. With Sarah by my side, helping others rise from their own ashes, I've found a purpose deeper than any I'd known, a legacy of strength, not just survival.